What's up everyone, and welcome back to another edition of Combo Damage TV. Before we get into this list, let me ask you a question. Why can't we get fighting games like this? I mean, just look at this. Look how beautiful this looks. I understand that this is just an action game, but you mean to tell me we can't design fighting games like this?
Why isn't it possible?
It's just not.
Why not, you stupid bastard?
I talked about this very problem in a previous video I recorded titled The Untapped Potential of Arena Fighting Games, in which I explain how arena fighters are simply third-person single-player game engines repurposed as fighting games, therefore proving that this format can be used for battling opponents online. This is why more action games need PvP, and when I say PvP, I specifically mean one-on-one. Trust me, I've gone through pretty much all of the PvP tags on Steam, and there are more battle royale options with too many players on screen causing a jumbled, ugly mess than there are true 1v1 fighting game experiences. So today, we're going to uncover the top 15 action games that could benefit from the inclusion of a one-on-one versus mode. Number 15, Listen to the Wind. Listen to the Wind is probably a game you've never heard of before. It's one of those rare games from China that you only find by delving into the obscure depths of indie titles on Steam at 1 o'clock in the morning. Described as a side-scrolling hack-and-slash game with counterattacks as the game's core mechanic, the very first thought that came to my mind after playing for an hour was, why isn't this a fighting game? I say this because the game is entirely built around one-on-one battles. That's right, there are no hordes of enemies or waves to clear. Each encounter pits you against a specific enemy type, and duels play out as an intense, neutral-heavy dance of deflects, weapon strikes, and guard breaks. Sprinkle in one of the most beautifully hand-painted art styles I've ever seen, and you have a fighting experience worth checking out if you're a fan of action combat. Given how amazing the fights play out, however, it's a shame that you can't fight other players online. Number 14. Aeon Must Die. Man, another example of how art style and presentation can enhance the experience of a game. Aeon Must Die is a single-player action-adventure game set in a dystopian, cyberpunk-themed future. Fights primarily play out as one-on-one battles, rich with traditional fighting game mechanics like parries, dodges, combos, and juggles. A unique rage meter encourages you to balance the flow of your offensive and defensive actions, or be left in a vulnerable state where one hit from your opponent can end your life. Even the store page on Steam makes note of stylish, accessible combat featuring proper fighting game mechanics, but unfortunately, you can only play this game alone. There's some apparent drama surrounding the publishers stealing work from the original developers, so supporting this game is entirely up to you. Nonetheless, it's an immersive audio-visual combat experience I recommend checking out. Number 13. Godfall. It's no secret that Godfall suffered from a pretty abysmal launch upon release, with the general consensus blaming the uninspired experience on its lack of innovation, underdeveloped characters, and repetitive gameplay. Nonetheless, I couldn't help but be attracted to the stuns, dodges, parries, and combos that were clearly present from the videos I saw on YouTube. Once the endgame was released, I grabbed the full package on a bargain bin sale on Steam and was pretty satisfied with the gameplay. In spite of it being a looter slasher, the combat is essentially an arcadey version of God of War, wrapped in a soulish experience without the Souls-like backtracking bullshit. I really feel like PvP with the option for 1v1 could have increased the replay value of this game. With so many warriors to choose from and bosses to encounter, being able to only unleash the battle system on the AI rather than a human opponent felt like a wasted opportunity. I'm not sure I'd recommend this one other than to pass the time, but I can definitely feel the gameplay potential for epic fights with another player. Number 12. Watch Dogs Legion Fight Club. You're telling me there's an underground fight club in a living, breathing, multiplayer open world, and I can't fight other players online? This hurt my feelings, and when the PvP launch trailer for Watch Dogs Legion was released, I was even more disappointed, as the only PvP modes added to the game were Invasion, which was a given, and Capture the Flag, otherwise known as Extraction. I don't even think there are vehicular races in this game. Someone correct me if I'm wrong, but if true, even that's a shame. Seriously though, I'm so hungry for new ideas in fighting games at this point that I probably would have bought this game just for this one mode alone. So much potential for an entire community of characters, betting, earning new attacks, and entering tournaments, but unfortunately, we didn't get it. Granted, the first two Watch Dogs games are superior to me in every other category, but Fight Club alone could have been such a cool online experience for Watch Dogs Legion. Number 11, Rise of the Ronin. At the time of this recording, Rise of the Ronin has not been released, and there's only like one trailer showing a brief glimpse of combat. All I know is, if I see shit like this, I immediately want online matches. Unfortunately, there isn't too much info surrounding this Team Ninja game other than being described as a third-person open-world action RPG with an emphasis on combat. For what it's worth, I really hope they add 1v1 online battles to the game, as I would love a break from the cartoony aesthetic found in traditional fighting games to something a bit more realistic. Number 10, Project the Perceiver. Here's another game that isn't out yet, and we don't even have clear 60 FPS footage of it running anywhere. But I can already tell that this is combat I would love to experience against real opponents online. It's been labeled as a Chinese fantasy open world action title, but so far there's been no explicit mention of PvP. Which is a shame, because based on the lengthy combat footage we've seen so far, this is but another example of an action game giving us a taste of where fighting games could go but never do. For me personally, if an arena fighter ever came out with an aesthetic like this, that would be a day one purchase. Number 9, Wukong, Fallen Dynasty. Team Ninja has clearly been capitalizing on action games based in feudal Japanese and Chinese settings, and Wukong is no exception. Unlike the shallow, hack-and-slash nature of their Dynasty Warriors franchise, Wukong is more in line with the battle mechanics of their Neo saga. Now, I'm not a fan of Souls-like games at all, but I do enjoy their battle mechanics, enough that some are arguably great candidates for 1v1 matches. Based on the little I've played along with what I've seen online, a versus mode would be a great addition to this game. It just feels fast, snappy, and more aggressive than other games in this category. Not to mention, stylistically, it just fucking looks cool. Number 8, Stellar Blade. At the time of this recording, Stellar Blade has not been released yet, but given the futuristically badass art style and setting, it's going on my list. From what I can tell, the gameplay will be based on a Souls-like enemy lock-on system with potentially more hack-and-slash elements like Bayonetta or Devil May Cry. So hopefully it'll be balanced and challenging rather than impossible. Like every game on this list though, there's probably no chance we'll actually get a versus mode. Even judging by the enemy designs we've seen so far, it seems like most battles will take place against mutants or monsters, rather than actual humanoid opponents who also wield some type of weapon. There's a brief glimpse of this in a trailer, which is probably the intro to a boss fight, but given the amazingly cinematic approach to the fight choreography here, there's gotta be potential for a fun versus mode. Number 7, Sifu. I mean, this one is clearly a no-brainer. We've seen co-op modes in beat-em-ups like this before, but the idea of a versus mode with this type of gameplay has so much potential. Dodges, grabs, deflects, and environmental attacks would have made for some pretty sick kung fu matches online. And given that the game has so many enemy types, there's already a foundation here to select from a roster of unique characters. I don't think there are any plans to bring an online component to this game, and if there is, I'd sooner expect it to be co-op, but every time I encounter a boss battle in Sifu, it just makes me think of how awesome a versus mode would be. Technically, the developers tried bringing this online once before, with a game called Absolver, but Sifu was the final form of that engine that truly deserves PvP. Number 6, Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Even though I don't like Souls games, I do appreciate their battle mechanics. How could I not, especially as a fighting game fan? Some are faster than others, and each is nuanced in its own way, but clashing swords beneath the moonlit cherry blossoms was enough to sell a lot of us on Sekiro. And while it's plagued by all the things I don't care for in a Souls game, the combat just feels oh so good. As far as I'm concerned, unique art style plus strong battle mechanics always equals good candidate for a versus mode, but unfortunately, we never got such a thing in Sekiro. Number 5, Ghost of Tsushima. Ghost of Tsushima is a truly exceptional game that excels in many ways, but for me, the standout feature were the intense one-on-one samurai boss battles. With every encounter, I couldn't help but wonder why there wasn't a versus mode available. While the game does feature an online component called Legends, it's limited to co-op play only. And while this is certainly enjoyable, the game's arsenal of weapons, including katanas, bows, arrows, explosives, and shuriken, make for a truly immersive samurai experience that I think would be even more thrilling in a competitive online setting. I doubt we'll ever get it, but the thought of a versus mode in Ghost of Tsushima sounds like it would have huge potential. Number 4, Devil May Cry. How does PvP not exist in this series yet? You're telling me that I can't have these badass Virgil versus Dante fights with people online? There are some seriously iconic enemy types in the Devil May Cry series, many of which could belong to a roster of characters in a fighting game. As one of the most popular titles among fighting game fans, the game's focus on stylish combos and juggles make it a natural fit for PvP. I'm sure more players would prefer co-op, but as one of the GOATs of hack and slash games, the lack of a versus mode has largely felt like a missed opportunity to me. If we're lucky, maybe we'll see a side title reimagined as an arena fighter someday in the future, but probably not. Number 3, Black Myth Wukong. The world was blown away when Black Myth Wukong was first revealed. Why? Not because we haven't seen third-person action games before, but because it had so much damn style. On paper, it's an action game like every other game on this list, but there's a reason why the reveal trailer has 10 million views. Just look at this fight. How awesome would it be to have the ability to have fights like this with another player? This game isn't coming out for another year, so maybe there's time, but if there was ever an upcoming action game that looked like it could benefit from a versus mode, it's this game right here. Number 2, Star Wars Jedi. The fact that a proper Star Wars fighting game hasn't existed in over 25 years is beyond me. This is literally a media franchise with a history of iconic lightsaber battles. And the closest thing we ever got were a couple of DLC characters in Soul Calibur 4. Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order was not only my personal 2019 game of the year, it's the only Star Wars related piece of content I've ever enjoyed. It's also one of the few action games that's built off of a Souls engine, but with optional difficulty settings and a system that doesn't punish you ridiculously for dying. The fight mechanics truly shine though during one-on-one battles, and if there was ever a game I wish had a versus mode, it's Fallen Order. Star Wars Jedi Survivor is the sequel that's around the corner. There's no mention of PvP, and who knows if there will ever be a DLC for a versus mode in the future. I'll be picking this one up regardless, but for me, the absence of PvP is pretty disappointing. Number 1, Code to Jin Yong. I swear, these fantasy action games from China are the perfect candidates for future fighting games. Either that or I'm just biased because this is the 4th one on this list. I mean, just look at the visual direction here. A realistic art style, leaves blowing in the wind, believable hit detection. Like almost every game on this list, none of the stereotypical fighting game tropes exist here, but instead of getting a fighting game, we're getting a single-player action game. Code to Jin Yong is an upcoming wuxia game described as an action-adventure experience based on a series of novels, and I cannot tell you how hyped I am for more details. Much like other third-person action games, my expectation for an online versus mode is very low, but I would love to see more wuxia art styles like this in future fighting games. And there you have it, my top 15 action games that need a versus mode. In my personal opinion, titles like these are oftentimes missed opportunities of where we could be taking competitive fighting game experiences. Whether it's art style, tone, graphics, or gameplay, the genre clearly doesn't have to be flooded with the same corny tropes, cheesy lore, or even traditional controls. And while I don't believe that every game needs to include multiplayer, A one-on-one versus mode can oftentimes be the better route over the messy, chaotic nature of Battle Royale. But what are your thoughts? Are there any action-adventure games based on fighting that you think could benefit from PvP? Let me know in the comments below. As always, thanks for stopping by, and see you next time.
You